Imagine discovering that everything you believe to be true is actually a cruel lie. And worst of all, the betrayal comes from the one you trusted most. Now, what would you do when the truth finally comes out, changing everything you knew about love, friendship, and trust? Prepare to follow the story of Anna, a woman who endured the deepest humiliation, and instead of destroying herself, used the pain as fuel to transform into an unbeatable version of herself. Revenge will be her greatest redemption. But the path to get there? You won't believe what she's capable of. Anna Paula was, in everyone's eyes, the woman of dreams. She had the perfect husband, Marcos, with whom she shared not only her days, but also her dreams, achievements, and the trust that only true love can give. They had been married for over 10 years, and their relationship was admired by all who knew them. Friends, family, and co-workers always commented on the couple's connection. Anna and Marcos were the example of what many sought, a solid union based on respect, love, and complicity. Anna worked as an executive at a successful company, but it was at home, with Marcos, that she felt complete. They shared a passion for travel, for simple moments like cooking together, and for the idea of a promising future, full of plans and projects. She believed, with all her heart, that she had found her soulmate. Marcos was the man she imagined would be by her side forever, someone she could grow old with, someone she could trust completely. Nothing and no one could break that trust. Or at least, that's what she thought. Anna always had a romantic view of love. For her, the promises made at the altar weren't just empty words, but a lifelong commitment. She believed that, over time, difficulties would be overcome with more love and patience. Her trust in Marcos was unshakable, as she saw in him the same dedication she herself offered to the relationship. And what could go wrong when everything seemed so perfect? The two often spent weekends with close friends and, most importantly, with family. Marcos always showed immense affection for Anna, and she, in turn, admired his dedication to work and family. Together, they were building a solid life, a stable and secure future. Anna had everything any woman could dream of: a healthy relationship, a successful career, and a comfortable life. And, in her mind, this harmony would last forever. But life sometimes has a way of showing us that things aren't always what they seem at first glance. What Anna didn't know was that, behind this facade of happiness, Marcos was beginning to distance himself from her in ways she couldn't understand. Small details began to emerge, subtle signs that something wasn't right. And that's when she realized that perhaps the perfection she so longed for wasn't as real as she thought. It was in the silence of the nights when Marcos isolated himself in his office, or in the messages he began hiding on his cell phone, that Anna began to notice the change. Before, he was always open to talking, to sharing his feelings and thoughts. Now he seemed distant, as if an invisible wall had risen between them. But deep down, Anna believed this was just a phase. Maybe he was just overwhelmed with work, or even facing something he didn't want to share. She tried to convince herself that this distance was temporary, a passing phase. After all, he was the man she'd always dreamed of, the man she imagined would face any obstacle with her. And that was how Anna deluded herself, because she never imagined that her own husband could be responsible for creating a silent abyss between them. She didn't know that Marcos, the man she believed to be her safe haven, was pulling away not only emotionally, but in a way that would shatter all her beliefs about their relationship. Anna's trust in Marcos was as solid as the foundation of a well-built house. She believed nothing could shake it, that the promises made at the altar would be fulfilled to the end. However, what she didn't know was that, behind the walls of her own home, lay a truth she never imagined. A hidden lie, a silent betrayal, slowly spreading, like a wound widening unnoticed. And this is where Anna's story begins to change. The woman who once believed her life was perfect would begin to realize that things weren't so simple. The trust she placed in Marcos would begin to crumble, and the pain she felt upon discovering the truth would be the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever. Because when the truth comes out, it not only destroys the lies, but also transforms the person who faces it head-on. Have you ever experienced something that irreparably shattered your confidence? Have you ever had to face a truth that changed everything you believed? If so, you'll understand what Anna is about to face. And if you haven't experienced something like this yet, perhaps this story is a warning about how sometimes lies can be closer than we imagine. In the next video, we'll follow the pain of discovering Anna's betrayal and how she deals with the impact of a lie that deeply shook her. Prepare for a journey of intense emotions, difficult choices, and of course, an awakening to a strength Anna never imagined she possessed. Did you like this first chapter of Anna's story? If you connected with the pain of trusting someone and being betrayed, and identified with the desire to start over and get back on your feet, then you need to continue following this journey. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss any chapter of this exciting story. After all, the truth always comes out, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Anna Paula always believed that the little things were what made her marriage with Marcos special. The daily gestures, the casual conversations about the small details of everyday life, the shared laughter on movie nights. Each moment seemed to fulfill the vision of a perfect love, the kind of love that grows stronger over time, without any major worries. But like everything in life, the routine of a union can hide the flaws that, however subtle, begin to make an increasingly loud noise. And so, little by little, Anna began to notice subtle changes in Marcos's behavior. The first sign that caught her attention was a simple detail: the way he began avoiding eye contact during conversations. A seemingly innocent behavior, but it made her uncomfortable. He was distant, as if his words didn't reflect the genuine connection they'd always had. Anna tried to ignore it. Maybe it was the stress of work. Marcos was dedicating himself so much to new projects at the office, and she knew this could affect his mood. But what she didn't know was that this was just the beginning of something much deeper. The first, most noticeable change was Marcos's behavior with his cell phone. Anna had never been the possessive type, but the way he began guarding his device became unusual. Before, it was common to see Marcos leaving his phone on the table, unconcerned, even the target of jokes between them. Now, he always kept it within reach, and when Anna approached, he quickly put it in his bag or discreetly walked away. He began using silent mode more frequently, and when she asked him about something, he responded quickly but evasively, avoiding prolonged contact. At first, Anna tried to rationalize these behaviors. It must be work-related, she thought. He's overwhelmed, and the messages could be from clients or coworkers. But something inside her told her there was more to this change. Her instincts, always sharp, began to question Marcos's every small gesture. He began spending more and more nights working late, something that had never been a pattern. Anna, for her part, found herself alone at home, looking at the clock, trying not to worry as he told her he was working on an important project. And even on the nights he came in late, there was none of the visible fatigue he normally felt after a hard day's work. He seemed light, as if his mind were elsewhere, far from home, far from her. One night Anna was alone, and restlessness was already taking over her. She decided to look at Marcos's phone, an action she never imagined doing. She didn't want to be intrusive, but something was eating away at her insides. The doubt had grown so strong that it seemed impossible to ignore. When Marcos entered the bathroom, Anna had the urge to check his messages. She felt guilty, but something inside her urged her to do it. The phone was on the nightstand, and she, heart-pounding, unlocked the screen. At that moment, the silence in the apartment seemed deafening. The messages were there. Several conversations with Patricia, her best friend. Anna knew they exchanged messages, but the tone of the conversations was different now. What had previously been simple exchanges about plans and daily updates were now conversations charged with intimacy. When she scrolled to the bottom of the screen, she saw a message that made her freeze for a second. "I miss you. Soon we'll be able to be together. and no one will separate us." The words were as cold as they were sharp. Anna felt as if she'd been punched in the gut. She read a few more messages, and the truth became clear. Marcos was involved in something much more serious than just work. He was having an affair with Patricia. Anna's world collapsed. She felt such intense pain, as if she were being crushed. It was a physical pain, as if something had been ripped from her chest. But there was something else. Disbelief. How could this be happening? How could Marcos, the man with whom she shared her dreams and her life, be doing this to her? The pain of betrayal mixed with a sense of humiliation. How could he? How could she be so blind? She quickly closed her phone and put it back, but she could no longer remain calm. Doubt had become certainty, and the truth could no longer be ignored. She tried to process what she had just learned, but everything seemed hazy. The words on the screen were etched in her mind, and her soul was consumed by a silent rage. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the lies, the disloyalty, the time he had spent with her while hiding something so profound. However, the feeling of betrayal wasn't the only thing that overcame Anna. A part of her also felt a growing sense of emptiness. How could she not have noticed before? The signs were there all along. She just didn't want to see them. The long nights working, the distancing, the strange behavior with her cell phone. All those signs, which she initially tried to ignore, were now evident like an indelible stain. She sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the discovery still crushing her heart. She was torn between anger and sadness. But above all, what hurt most was the feeling of helplessness. What to do now? She had to face Marcos and Patricia. But how? How to act in the face of all this? Doubt and insecurity paralyzed her. But at the same time, there was a growing strength within her. She didn't yet know how she would deal with it all. But one thing was certain. From that moment on, nothing would be the same again. If you've ever experienced a moment when all your certainties crumbled at once, you know what Anna is feeling. How do you react when you begin to realize that the worst is happening right before your eyes? Stay tuned, because in the next video we'll follow Anna as she decides how to deal with the pain of discovery and what she'll do next. If you've been through something like this, share your story in the comments, and if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. Don't miss the next chapters of this journey. Like and share, because anyone who has been through this knows the truth always comes to light. And now, what comes next is what will define the future. Anna Paula never imagined that the moment that would change her life would be so abrupt, so painful. For weeks, she found herself in a constant internal battle, trying to justify Marcos's strange behavior, trying to find excuses for what seemed like an irreversible change. She believed her suspicions might simply stem from insecurity or the stress of a busy life, but what was about to happen would show that reality was far crueler than she could have imagined. It was a night, like any other. Anna was home alone, a half-empty bottle of wine on the table, her eyes fixed on the computer screen. Marcos hadn't arrived yet, as usual, and the clock was already showing 10 p.m. She knew he was working late, an excuse that had become increasingly frequent in recent weeks. Sitting there, her head full of confusing thoughts, Anna tried not to let doubt consume her. But the truth was, with each passing minute, she felt the weight of uncertainty more intense. Something wasn't right. And her instinct, the same one that had guided her so many times in life, told her it was time to face it once and for all. It was then that she decided to do something she'd never considered. With her mind clouded with anxiety, she grabbed Marcos's cell phone. He always left it nearby, forgetting to lock or hide it, as if he thought she wouldn't notice. It was a reckless move, but she could no longer ignore the signs that were right before her eyes. Anna hesitated for a moment. She felt guilty for invading his privacy, but curiosity, mixed with the pain of distrust, pushed her to take that step. She unlocked her phone and, immediately, came across a message that made her freeze. A message from Patricia, her best friend. The sentence was simple, but full of hidden intentions. I'm sorry. I love you, and I can't wait to be with you again. Soon, no one will be able to separate us. Anna stopped breathing for a moment. What she was reading felt like a nightmare. It was impossible for her to be seeing this. But she was. Words leaped before her eyes, searing every part of her being. She was about to find concrete evidence of something she'd already suspected, but still didn't want to believe. She'd never imagined Marcos would betray her. But here was proof she could no longer ignore. With trembling hands, Anna scrolled down the conversation, hoping to find something that might offer some kind of explanation. But what she found was even more devastating. Photos of secret meetings, messages exchanged during work hours, and most painfully, words of affection and promises. Marcos, her husband, was having an affair with Patricia, her best friend. The impact of this discovery was so strong that, for a second, she couldn't process it. Everything she believed in, everything she trusted, was crumbling in a matter of minutes. The shock was immense. Anna felt such intense pain she could barely breathe. The world seemed to have spun wrong. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming. She was lost, as if in an endless hole with no way out. Every word in the messages seemed to pierce her soul. Every photo shared between them made her feel as if she were being impaled by her own reality. Worst of all, she knew them both. She had known Patricia for years, and she thought she had found in Marcos a person worthy of her trust. How could she have been so blind? How could she have trusted someone who, so coldly, destroyed everything they had built together? The physical pain she felt in that moment was indescribable. It was as if the air had been knocked from her lungs, as if her legs had become unable to support her. Anna sat up in bed, her cell phone still in her hands, and a feeling of helplessness washed over her. She looked around the room, the place where she had so often felt safe and loved. Now, that same room felt empty, as if it were no longer the home she knew. Marcos's betrayal, coupled with Patricia's lie, had shattered everything she believed to be unbreakable. As shock began to give way to deep pain, she felt a silent anger building within her. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal. It was the pain of the lie, of the broken friendship, of the trust that had been built over the years and now crumbling before her. What hurt most, perhaps, was the realization that she had been ignorant, that she hadn't seen the signs before. The small details, the evasive glances, the lame excuses. It all made sense now. She somehow knew, but she didn't want to believe it. Tears began to fall, but not from anger, not from sadness. It was a mixture of pain and loss. The loss of a relationship she believed would last forever. The loss of a friend she believed to be loyal. The loss of confidence in herself, in her own ability to see the truth. Anna felt alone, more alone than ever. And at the same time, she felt a new strength emerging within her. She didn't know how she would react, but one thing was clear. She couldn't let this destroy her. The truth, however painful, was now exposed, and what she did with it was what would truly define her future. What would Anna do now? How would she face Marcos and Patricia, knowing the truth could no longer be ignored? Doubt gave way to an impulse to act. She knew something had to be done, but she didn't yet know what. Only one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same, and the path ahead, though painful, was now the only one she could follow. If you've ever experienced something that shook your beliefs, share your story with us in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode, where we'll see Anna confront the people she loved most and the path she chooses from now on. Like and share if you connected with Anna's story. The truth is never easy to face, but it's the first step toward transformation. The pain of the discovery was still fresh in her chest. The words in the messages, the moments shared between them, the explicit betrayal, it all echoed in Anna's mind like distant music, a deafening sound that made her want to disappear, vanish from everything once and for all. But she knew she couldn't hide forever. The truth was before her, and she needed to face it once and for all. She needed to confront Marcos. She needed to confront Patricia, because if anything was to be rebuilt in her life, it would be through this confrontation. Anna knew it would be painful, but she needed answers. Something inside her burned. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just sadness. It was a hurricane of emotions. Pain, shame, frustration, helplessness. She looked in the mirror, her eyes red and puffy from crying, and made a silent promise. I'll do this for myself. No matter what, she could no longer live in doubt, in anguish, waiting for an I'm sorry that would never come. She needed the full truth, and she wanted to hear it from their lips. She called Marcos. He answered quickly, almost as if he already knew what was about to happen. His voice, normally soft and calm, was now more tense than ever. Hi, love, he said, with a slight hesitation. But Anna didn't let him. Continue. With a firm, blunt voice, she cut through any attempt at disguise. I know what you did. I saw the messages. I saw everything. The words came out of her mouth like a silent but powerful scream. She felt the tension rise on the other end of the line, but she didn't give in. What are you accusing me of? Marcos replied, trying to remain calm, but his voice already betrayed nervousness. He knew the game was lost, but still tried to cling to his words, as if that could turn the situation around. I saw the messages between you and Patricia. There's no point in trying to lie. I know everything, Anna said, unable to hide the pain that was building. Anger was beginning to take over her, but she knew she couldn't let the impulse control her. She needed to be rational, at least for now. On the other side, Marcos was silent for a moment. He knew he had nowhere else to run, but shame made him try to justify the unjustifiable. Anna, I didn't want you to know like this. I was waiting for the right moment, he said, trying to come up with a lame excuse. Anna's silence was an even stronger blow than any words. Time seemed to stand still, and the reality of the situation crashed down on her like an avalanche. He was cheating on her with her best friend, and yet he tried to downplay what he had done. She looked at her phone, Marcos's face flashing on the screen, and felt a mixture of anger and sadness. But she wouldn't give in. You cheated on me, Marcos. You cheated on me with my best friend. And you're still trying to find an excuse? What kind of man does that? What kind of person does that? Anna's scream echoed in the air, but it was no longer a scream of despair. It was a scream of liberation. She had faced the truth, and now she was ready to move on. Marcos's silence was long, but finally he spoke, in a lower tone, almost as if he were apologizing. I know I hurt you. It wasn't what I wanted, Anna. I was lost. Your relationship made me think that. I didn't want to hurt you. He was trying to justify himself again, but his words didn't touch Anna anymore. She didn't want to hear any more excuses. Not now. Not after everything he'd done. Anna hung up the phone with a sudden movement, leaving him talking in the air. But something inside her knew that this moment, this confrontation, had been a turning point. She had faced the man she believed to be the love of her life, and the truth, though painful, had somehow freed her. What came next would be harder, but she knew she was beginning to rebuild herself. Now, there was one last step, confronting Patricia. She knew finding her would be even harder. Patricia wasn't just a friend. She was someone who had been like a sister to Anna. The pain of knowing that her friend, the person she shared so many moments with, had also betrayed her, was almost unbearable. But Anna couldn't move on without this final confrontation. She needed to hear from Patricia what motivated her to betray her trust so cruelly. Anna called Patricia in for a chat, and as soon as her friend entered, the tension in the air was palpable. Patricia entered the room with a nervous expression, trying to hide her embarrassment. She knew what was coming, but tried to maintain a facade. Anna looked at her coldly, and in her voice there was a determination Patricia had never seen before. I know everything, Patricia. There's no more room for lies, Anna said bluntly. Her friend tried to speak, but Anna interrupted her. Don't try to convince me of anything. You slept with my husband. I saw the messages, the photos. There's no more excuse. Patricia tried to explain herself, her voice trembling. Anna, I never meant to hurt you. I was confused, and Marcos paid attention to me. I didn't know what I was doing. I messed up, and I know there's no excuse. She spoke quickly, as if trying to rid herself of the guilt, but her words were empty. Anna couldn't believe her anymore. The pain Anna felt was indescribable, but what hit her most was the betrayal of her friendship. Patricia, the person she trusted, was now just a stranger, and the weight of humiliation intensified with every word her former friend said. But with a heavy heart, Anna replied, "You didn't make a mistake, Patricia. You chose. You betrayed me in a way I'll never forget. Our friendship. I don't know what to do with it anymore." Patricia, her face flushed with embarrassment, tried to approach, but Anna took a step back. "Don't come any closer," she said firmly. "You destroyed everything. Now I need to move on, alone." When Patricia left, Anna was left alone in the room, still processing everything that had happened. The sense of relief she felt was immense. She knew the pain wouldn't disappear overnight, but she had taken an important step. The confrontation with Marcos and Patricia was just the beginning of her reconstruction. Now, she could finally begin rebuilding her life, without the lies, without the betrayals, without the weight of false promises. After the confrontation with Marcos and Patricia, Anna felt as if the ground had disappeared from under her feet. No matter how hard she tried to remain steadfast or rational, the truth was that the pain was growing more intense. She felt a pain so deep she couldn't explain it. How could something she believed to be perfect fall apart so quickly? How could she have been so blind? And most importantly, how could she have been so humiliated? The feeling of being left aside, betrayed, and completely disregarded by two people she trusted deeply was devastating her with every passing second. The humiliation Anna felt wasn't just from the physical betrayal, but from the shame she felt for not having realized it sooner. How could someone be so vulnerable, so fragile, to believe lies for so long? Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman she no longer recognized. She was no longer the strong, confident Anna who dedicatedly managed her career and life. The woman in the mirror was now someone completely different. She was a broken woman, someone who had been deceived, used and discarded as if she were a disposable object. Anna spent the next few days in emotional turmoil. Simply leaving the house seemed unbearable. She couldn't look at the people around her without feeling a sharp pain in her chest. She felt as if everyone knew her pain, as if it were written all over her face. The shame was overwhelming. Every message of support she received from friends and family felt like irony. "You'll get through this, Anna. You're strong." But deep down, she didn't feel strong. She felt weak, helpless, as if all her self-confidence had vanished. The betrayal affected not only her marriage, but her very identity. Anna no longer knew who she was without Marcos by her side. For years, she had defined herself through him. They were a couple, a unit, a partnership. Now, without him, without Patricia's friendship, she didn't know where to turn. The pain of knowing she had been replaced by another woman, that she wasn't enough, consumed her thoughts. Anna's self-esteem, which had always been reasonably healthy, was irreparably destroyed in that moment. She felt as if she had been invalidated, as if all her love, dedication, and trust had meant nothing. Anna spent hours alone in her apartment, staring at the walls, trying to process the reality of the situation. She refused to go out, to see people. Conversations with friends became uncomfortable. No one knew what to say. And, honestly, she didn't know what she wanted to hear either. Words of comfort felt hollow, as if all she wanted was for time to stop, so she could escape this nightmare. But there was no escape. The truth was there, staring her in the face, and she had no choice but to face it. One of the worst parts of the humiliation was that she felt she had been placed in a vulnerable position, where her own feelings didn't matter. Marcos and Patricia went on with their lives, while she was left alone, torn apart. They had moved on, while she was stuck in the past, in the pain of what had happened. And deep down, Anna knew nothing would change for them. All that was left for her was to try to pick up the pieces of her own life, her identity, and rebuild it. She tried to occupy herself with work, with her daily tasks, but nothing seemed to matter anymore. She could no longer concentrate, could no longer look in the mirror without remembering the betrayal. The reflection she saw was not the powerful, determined woman she once was. She was a broken woman, unable to believe in herself. She began to question whether she would ever be able to love again, to trust anyone. How could she? How could she give herself to someone again, knowing that trust can be broken so cruelly? In a moment of desperation, Anna reached into the back of her drawer, where she kept all the good memories of her relationship with Marcos. Photographs, birthday, cards, even gifts he had given her. She picked them up and looked at them as if she were a stranger. Every memory, every gesture of affection she had received, now felt empty, as if part of a lie. She looked at the photos and, for the first time, didn't recognize the woman smiling beside Marcos. She felt as if she had been deceived for years, as if every good moment had been just a facade. The pain of humiliation was beyond anything she expected. It wasn't just a matter of feeling betrayed. It was a feeling of total devaluation. She had been rejected not only by Marcos, but also by the friend from whom she most expected loyalty. What was left of her own worth, of her own identity, when everything around her seemed to have been built on a lie? How can someone rebuild self-confidence when the foundation of their life has been destroyed? For days, Anna tried to deny that shame and humiliation were dominating her life. She forced herself to leave the house, to go to work, to do her daily routines. But every step was a struggle. She was afraid of being seen, of people knowing what had happened. Even without saying a word, she felt as if she were being judged by everyone. People's gaze seemed to weigh heavily on her, as if they were seeing right through her, seeing the pain she tried to hide. But deep down, Anna knew this humiliation couldn't be the end. She couldn't spend the rest of her life spiraling into self-loathing and shame. It was impossible for her identity to be entirely defined by the pain she was feeling. The strong woman she had always been still existed, but now she needed to reconnect with that strength, rise from the ashes of this humiliation, rebuild her self-esteem, and learn to love herself again. She didn't know how she would do it, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't let herself be consumed by pain. The humiliation she felt in that moment wouldn't define who she was forever. She would choose in time to redefine herself and learn to trust again. The pain she felt today would sooner or later transform into something that would make her stronger. It was time to rise up. Anna was exhausted from living with the weight of betrayal, humiliation, and uncertainty. She knew the wound was still raw, and that the healing process wouldn't be easy. But somehow, something inside her was beginning to shift. It wasn't just the pain of loss or anger over the betrayal anymore. It was a growing impulse, a need to move forward, to escape the emotional prison she'd been trapped in for months. She knew she needed to change, that she could no longer define herself by Marcos's lies or Patricia's deceit. Anna's first difficult decision was to remove herself from the toxic environment that surrounded her. She could no longer live in that place of deceit, nor remain associated with people who had so cruelly violated her trust. But the separation wasn't just physical. It also had to be emotional. Anna knew that to begin her transformation, she needed to sever the emotional ties that still bound her to that painful past. This meant distancing herself from Marcos, Patricia, and even mutual friends who, in some way, were still part of that toxic environment. She began to eliminate any trace of her former relationship with Marcos. The old messages on her phone, The photos she kept as a reminder of a love that now seemed distant and unrecognizable were erased one by one. With each deleted message, each deleted image, it felt like she was erasing a piece of the pain. But at the same time, she knew it wasn't just the technology or the objects that needed to be erased. She needed to cleanse her mind and heart of all the suffering she had accumulated. Anna knew that the greatest obstacle she would face was not in the outside world, but within herself. She needed to reconnect with her essence, with the strong woman she once was. But to do so, she would need to leave behind all the doubts and insecurities that sabotaged her. The pain of betrayal would no longer be the center of her life. The humiliation she felt, the memories of a broken love, would not define her future. She was determined to use it as fuel for her transformation, for her rebirth. The pain would, yes, be a turning point, but not the end of her story. The first step in this reinvention was a simple yet powerful one. She began taking care of herself. At first, it felt like a hollow effort, as if she were simply trying to fill the void left by her loss. But little by little, Anna began to realize that this simple act of self-care, whether it was a relaxing bath, a walk in the fresh air, or even practicing yoga, was giving her back a sense of control over her life. She felt she was beginning to reconnect with her body, her health, and above all, her self-esteem. Instead of losing herself in negative thoughts, Anna allowed herself to look at herself with compassion. She was no longer the woman who had been betrayed, no longer the victim of the situation. She was now a woman rebuilding herself, a woman who deserved to be loved, respected, and above all, valued. This idea grew within her. She was no longer willing to be the shadow of pain, shame, and humiliation. She wanted to be more. She wanted to be the woman who could rise from any situation, the woman who used adversity to strengthen herself. Anna then decided she needed to focus on something bigger than her personal pain, her own goals and dreams. She had wasted so much time in the past few months, consumed by anger and sadness. But now, she knew it was time to get her life back. She dedicated herself to work, to the personal projects she'd always put aside. It was no longer a way to distract herself. It was a way to invest in herself, to grow and feel capable again. She also decided it was time to open herself up to new experiences. No, it wasn't about a new relationship or trusting someone immediately. But Anna knew that to fully heal, she needed to allow herself new possibilities, new encounters, new adventures. She started going out more, engaging in activities she previously thought she didn't have time for. She attended self-discovery workshops, traveled more, and connected with others who inspired her. And in doing so, Anna discovered there was much more to her than she'd imagined. Her inner strength, previously stifled by pain, was resurfacing, and this made her feel alive again. The greatest challenge of all, however, was learning to forgive herself. She had blamed herself so much for the betrayal and humiliation she suffered. She felt that somehow she had failed. But over time, Anna understood that the only mistake she made was trusting people who weren't worthy of that trust. She understood that it wasn't her fault. What Marcos and Patricia did wasn't her responsibility. The real mistake was their betrayal, not her trust. This understanding was the first step toward true liberation. Anna finally understood that there was nothing wrong with being vulnerable, with believing in people. The mistake wasn't in her giving love and trust. The mistake was in the one who broke that trust. Throughout this process, Anna began to feel stronger every day. What once seemed impossible, recovering her self-esteem, reconnecting with her essence, now seemed a natural path. She was no longer carrying the weight of betrayal. Not anymore. She had decided that the pain she had experienced would become a story of overcoming, not defeat. She knew that the woman looking in the mirror now was not the same as before. She was a stronger, wiser, and more self-confident version of herself. But Anna also knew the journey wasn't over. Reinvention would be an ongoing process, a process of self-discovery and growth. Each day was a chance to continue her journey of transformation. She still had much to learn about herself, but most importantly, she was ready to move forward, without looking back, without allowing herself to be imprisoned by the shadows of the past. Now Anna knew that true strength came not from the absence of pain, but from the ability to rise, to use pain as a springboard to something greater. And she was more than ready for that future. She was no longer a broken woman. She was a woman reborn. When the pain of betrayal finally began to fade, Anna realized the worst was over. The humiliation, abandonment, and feelings of helplessness were becoming a thing of the past. But more importantly, she realized that the greatest enemy to her reconstruction was not Marcos or Patricia, but rather the idea that she could remain a victim forever. Time had shown that, while the pain had broken her, it had also forced her to find a strength she hadn't even known she possessed. Now, all that remained was the choice of how to move forward. And Anna knew she could no longer give in to frustration. Anna decided that while revenge against Marcos and Patricia would motivate her, she would do it differently. She didn't want an impulsive revenge, filled with rage and despair. She wanted revenge that was more than just punishing others. She wanted to use this revenge as a process of self-empowerment. Revenge wouldn't be about destroying them, but about rebuilding herself in such a powerful way that no one would ever dare underestimate her again. She knew that to get revenge, she needed to become the best version of herself, someone who had not only risen from the ashes, but someone who was unbeatable. Instead of acting out of anger, she chose to act strategically, turning each step of her revenge into a stepping stone to her personal success. Anna's first step was to focus on her own career and future. When the cheating scandal came to light, she realized that Marcos and Patricia were dragging her name through the mud in an effort to minimize the impact of their actions. But Anna knew that if she truly wanted revenge, she needed to move away from any victimhood narrative and put herself in a position of power. She began to invest more in her professional career. That's when she decided to take a bigger step and pursue the promotion she had put off for so long. She dedicated herself completely to her work, demonstrating her competence, intelligence, and leadership. Each advancement she achieved, each recognition, made her feel she was moving further away from the pain of the past. But what Anna really wanted was more than a promotion. She wanted to show everyone, including Marcos and Patricia, that she could achieve success on her own, without relying on anyone else. She used the financial investments she had made in the past, the time and trust she had lost to Marcos, and applied them to something that would help her grow even further. Anna began investing in courses, training, and networking, surrounding herself with people who encouraged her and saw her as a potential leader. But Anna's revenge wasn't limited to her career. She knew that complete transformation would come from within, from rebuilding her identity and regaining the confidence she'd lost. So, while she dedicated herself to her work, she also began to dedicate herself to physical activity and self-care in ways she never had before. She took up boxing to release pent-up anger, ran long distances to clear her mind, and even dabbled in art and photography, hobbies she'd always wanted to explore but never had the courage to. Each new experience was a way to assert her independence, to show herself that she didn't depend on anyone else for happiness or success. Anna's revenge was actually a form of empowerment. She realized she didn't need Marcos or Patricia to feel validated. She didn't need them to regret or feel ashamed of what they had done. What she needed was to free herself from the pain she had carried for so long. And to do that, revenge wasn't just against others, but against the part of herself that had allowed herself to be manipulated. It was against the woman she had been, the woman who sacrificed herself to trust the wrong people. Over time, Anna began to notice changes within herself. She no longer saw herself as the woman who had been betrayed, but as the woman who was rebuilding herself from the broken pieces. She became more assertive, stronger, and more determined. With each new success in her life, with each personal or professional achievement, she felt a growing energy, as if she were rising from the ashes. And although she still hadn't forgotten what Marcos and Patricia had done, she knew that true revenge lay in her own happiness and success. They could move on with their lives, but Anna knew that no one could ever take from her what she was gaining: the strength to be who she truly was, and the freedom to be herself without any more false promises. What shocked Anna most was realizing that, while Marcos and Patricia continued their lives feeling as though they had gotten away with it, Anna was building something much greater than mere retaliation. She was building an empire of trust, freedom, and self-sufficiency. And this, she knew, was something that could not be destroyed by anyone. True power lay in her ability to move forward, to rebuild her life with her own hands, without relying on excuses or regrets from others. She finally realized that, instead of destructively seeking revenge, she had found true victory: herself. She was now the woman who had overcome pain, humiliation, and betrayal, and had reinvented herself in such a powerful way that no one could ever take that away from her. Revenge, then, was no longer a matter of retaliation. She had already exacted her revenge in the best way possible, by showing herself that nothing and no one could defeat her. Marcos and Patricia were just a part of the past, a part Anna used to transform herself and achieve the freedom she always deserved. Now, she was in control of her own life, and nothing could take that away from her. Anna's journey was far from easy. Every step, every decision she made, was a battle against the pain, shame, and lies that once defined her life. But over time, she realized that the truth she so feared wasn't something that would destroy her, but something that would set her free. What seemed like the end of everything she knew was actually the beginning of a powerful and profound transformation. The truth didn't break her. It made her stronger. It didn't crumble her. It made her more whole. Throughout her journey of reinvention, Anna began to realize that the greatest gift of pain and betrayal was the opportunity to reconnect with herself, to rediscover her inner strength and her ability to rise again, even when the world seemed to collapse around her. She was no longer the woman broken by humiliation. She was no longer the woman who saw herself as a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Anna had transformed into the woman who chose her own destiny, who decided how to rise from the ashes. The rebuilding process wasn't simple, but Anna learned to use pain as fuel for her own empowerment. She realized that, instead of being dominated by feelings of anger and loss, she could use them as a platform for her ascension. She transformed into a woman who knew the value of her self-esteem, who understood that true strength doesn't come from a relationship or the approval of others, but from the confidence we have in ourselves. Anna discovered that by leaving behind everything that limited her, the lies, the trauma, and the emotional dependence, she was creating space for something much more powerful: her own freedom. She reconnected with her essence, her dreams, and ambitions. Anna now had a clear vision of who she wanted to be, no longer defined by others' expectations or the choices of others, but a woman who made her own decisions and shaped her future according to her truth. The woman she had been before the betrayal was no longer the same. She became unstoppable, someone who knew what she wanted in life and who wouldn't let anyone bring her down. But the greatest gift Anna received was the understanding that the truth, however painful, was not her enemy. The truth was what set her free. It was what freed her from the prison of a toxic relationship and a false friendship. It was the truth that, when it finally came to light, made her see how strong she truly was. She didn't need Marcos or Patricia's approval to know her worth. They, who had once been the foundation of her life, were now merely distant figures, with no power over her happiness. The truth, then, didn't destroy her. It made her more powerful than she ever imagined. She was now a woman who allowed herself to feel, but also allowed herself to move forward. The past, with all its pain and humiliation, was now nothing more than a distant memory. Anna was in control of her life. She was the author of her own story, the protagonist of her journey of overcoming. And with each step she took toward her future, she became stronger, more empowered, more confident in who she was. What happened to Marcos and Patricia? Anna didn't know. And more importantly, she no longer cared. The revenge she sought wasn't about destruction or retaliation. True revenge was her own transformation. The world around her changed when she finally accepted her truth and used it to rebuild herself. She knew she was ready for new challenges, new stories, and above all, for love. Not a love based on empty promises, but a love for herself that she had never experienced before. Anna learned that true strength comes from within. She learned that pain is not the end, but an opportunity for growth. She learned that even when the world seems to be falling apart, we always have the ability to rise, rebuild, and create a new path for the future. The truth can be difficult to face, but when we finally embrace it, it sets us free. And that's what happened to Anna. She not only overcame betrayal, she became the unbeatable woman she always wanted to be. Now, Anna is more than ready for the life she's chosen. She's empowered, confident, and, most importantly, at peace with herself. And no one can ever take this peace, this inner strength, from her. If you identified with Anna's journey, if you've experienced moments of pain and humiliation and found the strength to rise again, share your story with us. And if you're ready to continue this journey of transformation and self-improvement, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't miss the next chapter of Anna's life. Because just like her, you too can reinvent yourself and become unbeatable.